The Ravages of Stress with Rena Davis. We're excited to have her here tonight. And, as we began thinking about stress and the challenges it brings in our life, I was talking with Rena earlier. We were talking about a guy by the name of Anthony Williams, and he said, when we're under stress, adrenaline pumps into the liver, which puts us at risk for countless symptoms and conditions, including liver disease. It breaks down our bile reserves, breaks down hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Even in young people, livers today are being bombarded with the effects of excess adrenaline. Think about that and what it's doing to your liver. You begin to understand why it's so important that we have liver support. And it was interesting that, some stress facts. Stress leaves 80% of women feeling unable to cope compared to 67% of men who feel the same. Now listen to this. The Mental Health Foundation surveyed more than 4,600 people and found 18 to 24-year-olds are more stressed than their parents. So it affects our brain. Matter of fact, some people say it actually could cause brain shrinkage, that stress can cause muscle loss, weakened internal organs, diminished eyesight and hearing, even compromised mental abilities, all of which are typical symptoms of accelerated aging. Even at a cellular level, stress can do more than just promote inflammation. It can even cause life-shortening damage, studies show. So, is this an important subject tonight? Absolutely. The ravages of stress. And I'm so delighted that we've got a biochemist here, Rena Davis, coming to the table to talk to us a little bit about these ravages of stress. Welcome to the call tonight, Rena. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Stress is abundant in life today, and it doesn't seem to be changing. I tell my clients that the one thing you can count on about stress is it's always going to be there. It's just somehow it changes flavors every now and again to keep things kind of interesting. It's been interesting in talking with a number of my clients about stress that we really feel that stress is some kind of outside factor. But literally, the medical definition of stress is the physical or biological or psychological effect that causes stress in an organism and its response to stressors. Now, stressors can be emotional, they can be financial, they can be environmental, they can be biochemical, they can be due to surgeries, medications, losing a pet. There are so many factors that are actual stressors that it sets up this condition, stress in the body, which then triggers a whole cascade of chemistry inside of us to help our body cope with what's going on at that moment. Now, a major stress, even if it only lasts for a very short period of time, causes these same chemical reactions. Adrenaline, everybody knows about adrenaline. We've all experienced that, I think, at least once in our lives. Even if it was just somebody momentarily pulling out of us unexpectedly in traffic, we all know the effects of a little bit of adrenaline. But, adrenaline, as Rob just referred to, has been studied, numerous studies since the 1960s. There were some a little before that. But basically, since the 1980s through the current time, we're beginning to look at stress in a much more in-depth way. There are literally thousands of studies that have been done on stress. And, the reason is that we've come to understand that there are all of these things that can happen inside of us as a response to those stress hormones going off and going a little crazy. Some of these are probably a little less known than others. I mean, certainly we know, I think, as a broad population, that stress can cause elevated blood pressure. In some individuals, it can actually cause reduction in blood pressure. Too low isn't any better than too high, folks, in case you were wondering about that. But did you know that it can cause hair loss, especially in the female population? Now, this is kind of interesting. you have these chemicals inside of your body called androgens. And when we're under stress, especially prolonged, like we've been going through for at least the last decade and a half, where it's chronic. It's happening day in, day out, every day. And we don't really know what to do about it. We don't really know how to alleviate it. We just sort of creeps up on us and it's there all the time. And we only know when we start jumping out of our seats when somebody comes home from school or work. And even though we know it's about time for that to happen, we hear the door close and we jump. Or we come home from work at night and the babysitter looks like she's gone about 5 rounds with Muhammad Ali in his prime, and the kids are tearing the place up and screaming and hollering, and before you know it, you're coming through the door and you're screaming and hollering too. So as these antigens start to build up in the system chronically, they literally can cause hair loss. One of the bigger concerns, and there's literally billions of dollars worth of products being produced right now for something called alopecia, which is what appears to be sudden hair loss. It's really not sudden, except the symptom of it. All of a sudden, you got big handfuls of hair coming out in the shower every morning or when you comb your hair. But the androgens have been building up in the system for weeks and even months until finally we get that place where the straw that breaks the camel back happens, and all of a sudden we're losing our hair by the handfuls. Another one that the androgens affect is acne. And we see this, I mean, years ago when I was a kid in school, yeah, acne was around. That was sort of the beginning of the bad food diet. In the 50s, we were still eating stuff that we grew in our own gardens, canned, froze, dried in our own homes. All the things that are available to us today were not available in the grocery stores, and diets were still pretty healthy. And in fact, if you got a soda pop once a month when you went to the movies, that was considered, being in a privileged level of income, because it just didn't happen all the time, and it wasn't considered to be healthy by our parents and our grandparents. Today, acne strikes young people, and we're talking young, up to the age of 30 to 35, 10 times more frequently than it did from 1950 to 1960. Androgens. We know that certainly continuous stress can cause headaches or hypertension, but did you know that it can actually cause jaw and tooth pain? Now, some of that is believed because when we're overstressed, we'll clench our teeth at night. When we do that over and over and over again, this causes irritation in our mouth. It can lead to gum recession. It can actually lead to fractured teeth, and also because of the gum resection, the part of our tooth that literally should always be underneath the gum has less dentin protection, and so it can also lead to cavities. Another one that's pretty interesting is itchy skin. Have you ever just experienced that your skin is itching for absolutely no apparent reason? There doesn't seem to be a bug bite. You didn't use any new lotions. You didn't, nothing makes any sense of why you should be itching. And it can go intermittently all day long. If it keeps on happening over a period of time, then rashes can actually develop. And if you've ever gone to a dermatologist and had a skin rash and they said to you, well, you have eczema, and the doctors can't find any physiological reason for that, although they don't do the in-depth testing on the hormones and androgens and other chemical factors that can cause that, lots of times it's because of chronic stress. We see it a lot in our young people today. I think kids are really stressed about the world that they're moving into. It's harder and harder when kids graduate for them to get into college. The sticker shock goes up about that all the time. I mean, right here in downtown Portland right now, if you were going to Portland State, and if you're in the northern part of Oregon, that's the next stop once you've got out of the community colleges. Your tuition price is going to triple. If you're going to live anywhere within 15 miles of the school, you're probably going to pay $2,400 a month for a bachelor apartment, and usually there's going to be 6 or 8 kids living in a little tiny flat with one bathroom, one teeny tiny kitchen, and everybody's crashing on the floors. So our kids are going through a lot of stress, and they know that as they come out of school, the competition for good jobs out there is ever increasing. And so we begin to see that there is a higher percentage of eczema, skin rashes, chronic itchy skin, which most doctors will control with steroid creams, which actually work for a while, but it never gets better. It seems to take more and more all the time. Certainly, it's interesting to note that the effects of stress on the body where sexual performance and fertility are concerned. Certainly, many women don't know this, I'm pretty sure, just based on the number of people that I deal with year after year after year. But irregular periods, painful periods, heavy cramping, heavy bleeding, that can be caused by stress, quite simply stress. Certainly, a bad diet aids in that. When you get stressed out, well, very often we're looking for those things to try and calm us down dietarily, so it leads us to more carbs. And then when our energy gets too low, then we start craving sugar to pick our energy up, and you can see the yo-yo syndrome right there. But it's very interesting to study fertility in animal studies that have been done where there is a lot of stress from new predators that have come in from other countries, species that aren't normal to the North American continent, beginning to push other species out of their habitat, environmental concerns from toxins from, well, you can say forest fires. I mean, boy, we're seeing that in California right now, aren't we? Pretty awful. Pesticides, herbicide, other environmental pollutants from, all the cars on freeways to factories, the list goes on. Some species, it will actually increase sexual drive and sexual performance to create more offspring for that species to survive. In the human species, that doesn't happen too often except in times of war. In times of war, there is this funny thing that happens in humans where our sexual activity is peaked, our hormone production is peaked, and generations are born with a much higher population. And look at what happened after World War II. My generation is the highest generation. The next 3 generations after us don't even come close to holding the amount of population that my generation has. And everybody's worried about that because the next generations are supposed to support all of us old folks here going into Social Security, and the population of the next generations is too small to be able to do that. It's just a fascinating study. Well, what really happens then? Rob was kind enough to talk a little bit about cortisol and adrenaline. Adrenaline gets pumped out, and a lot of it goes to the liver. And one of the messages that the adrenaline is carrying, because it's a hormone, right? Hormones are sort of the directors of biochemistry in the human body. And so it goes to the liver and it says, look, it's an emergency and it's a bloomin' big one. So you better get that glycogen production up and get that out to the muscle so the muscle has energy to do the fight, flight, or fight. And it works. I mean, that's part of the reason that you can get so pumped up with so much energy. The problem is that if it keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening, we now know that stress alone can create, the nice way to say it is fatty liver syndrome. Fatty liver syndrome is cirrhosis. And it doesn't matter whether it's being caused by medication, too much alcohol, too many drugs, or too much stress. The effect in the liver becomes the same. So how important is it for each and every one of us to be very serious about learning how to help our bodies rebalance when it's in fight flight? Pretty darn important indeed. We go on from there to recognize that there are numerous other things, literally physical diseases that can happen in our body. That the stress can lead us vulnerable to a depressed immune system. It can lead to irregularity, inability to regulate blood sugar properly, and can lead to things like type 2 diabetes. It can lead to several forms of cancer. It can make you sore and achy and cranky all the time because when those stress hormones are chronically at fight flight, our pH goes off. Now, when the pH goes off, we get into some pretty serious stuff, because the blood can only tolerate the teeniest, tiniest deviation in pH, acid alkaline regulation, without the red blood cell membrane starting to break. So when we're in chronic fight flight, the first thing that happens is we send out tons of glycogen so that all the muscles and all the organs have the fuel that they need to meet the demand. When that doesn't go away, however, the next step is that we start robbing nutrients from our dietary intake to help regulate pH, especially of the blood. But the catch-22 in that scenario leads us down a very strange course because we want foods that tend to calm the system down. So we want the cookie, we want the donut, we want the cup of coffee. Look it up on the internet. What do you get from those foods? Get any zinc, calcium, magnesium, potassium? Those are only important for muscle contraction, including heart function. So you can kind of see what begins to happen. Then that does a downward spiral on blood sugar regulation. So now we've got another internal red alert going on because the brain, through this pituitary hypothalamic adrenal axis, is trying to modulate all of these biochemical processes inside of our body. And pretty soon, this up and down of blood sugar gets a little chronic, and we're pumping out more insulin and then less insulin and then more insulin. And pretty soon, your blood sugar is like the best roller coaster you've ever been on in your whole life. We can see that, and these are just a few of the things. Now, we talked a minute ago just about this hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. This is really kind of important because we're really talking now about the master controlling system. This is critical because those guys tell every endocrine how much hormone to produce and when to produce it. It also regulates neurotransmission. Neurotransmitters are really important because they define who we are, whether we're happy or whether we're sad, whether we sleep, whether we don't sleep, whether we crave sugar and carbohydrate or whether we don't. And, the body does compensate with all this craziness going on with pH and liver toxicology and poor bile production, which then, by the way, minimizes your ability to separate fats from proteins. So now we're not getting the fats emulsified as the best and highest calorie fuel source for us. The proteins aren't getting separated. So now we have an introduction of a problem with supply and demand. Those proteins break down into amino acids that produce all of our hormones, all of our neurotransmitters, all of our digestive and protective enzymes. So I think you're kind of starting to get the point here that in the body, we have all of these reactions going on. And this can lead to headaches, heartburn, rapid breathing, increased depression, weakened immune system, insomnia, and the list goes on, hair loss. I mean, done long term, and there's studies going on about this right now that I think that are going to verify it. But if any of you have ever dealt with people with severe psychological disorders, we're now finding that these chronic stressors are actually the setup for some of these things that we never knew about before. I hate to think of the number of people that are taking psychoactive medications who definitely need it. But if we were correcting the stressors and then correcting how our body responds to those stressors, rebalancing blood sugar, rebalancing pH, bringing our fuel-getting system called the digestive system back online and functioning correctly. Now we are providing the raw materials at the cell level, at the organ level, at the hormonal level, the neurotransmitter level, the managing director level of the body, back into alignment. And that definitely affects our appetite. And all of a sudden, those sugary foods and those starchy foods become less important to us because those systems are being managed and balanced. So now we're talking about having an effect on underweight, we're talking about having effect on overweight, we're talking about having effect on obesity, we're having an effect on type 2 diabetes, and the list goes on. It is just very interesting as we really study the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis that this actually controls the entire musculoskeletal system, the respiratory system, cardiovascular system, endocrine system, nervous system. Okay, not just part of the nervous system, the entire nervous system, which is very complex, as I'm sure you're aware. Female reproductive system, male reproductive system, and gastrointestinal system. Now, you guys have been around long enough to know that we say that 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. Anything that affects the gastrointestinal system chronically over time is going to result in some serious problems down the road. The way I explain it to my clients is, look, we all have an army, every one of us. I mean, we've got the generals, we've got the corporals, the sergeants, we've got the foot troops, we've got the Green Beret man, we got the Navy, we got it all inside of us, all of the time. But the reality is this: if you can't give these guys communication with each other, if you can't give them bullets for their guns, gas for their jeeps, boots for their feet, and a sandwich for their tummy, that army isn't going anywhere. And we're cutting it off at the pockets by disturbing endocrine function, neurotransmitter function, hormonal function. But one of the biggest is the gastrointestinal, because that's where we get rid of at least 70% of our metabolic waste. It's where 70% of our immune system is, and it's where we get 100% of the fuel that we need to take care of our Army, our Navy, our Marine Corps, and oh, by the way, all of those citizens out there that are making the shoes and making the scarves and getting the groceries to the grocery store. All of that system is being affected by the body's response to chronic outside stressors. In reality, when I first learned about Solera and started researching what this product actually is, what its track record is, that I still haven't gotten through all of the studies that have been done on this product. I'm not talking about second-party literature on this herb or that herb, and we use that. It's important because, you know, it helps us learn that if we put a little turmeric or a little garlic or a little rosemary in our food, we're actually hedging our bets, you know, digestively, immunologically, anti-inflammatory, all those things. But the reality is when stress becomes chronic for so long, over so much time, we really need help. I don't know a single practitioner anywhere on this planet that wouldn't tell you today our biggest number one concern is stress management. And there is billions of dollars being invested in studying the effects and what we can do about it. Many of the companies that are secondary companies, sort of Reader's Digest companies, that put out blurbs every month, maybe a paragraph or two, or you can click there and go look at the actual study. They're all starting to study adaptogens. They have all come to realize that these stress factors, as the world goes faster, as resources get more and more in demand, as pollution becomes a bigger and bigger issue. I mean, all of these things are beginning to have this really downward spiral on our health. And you start reading study after study after study after study on Solera. And I love to read this stuff at night. I really do. The world is quiet. The phone isn't ringing. I can really concentrate. I can be at my computer. I can look up all the secondary information. I can see who all these doctors are. Was this a study designed to get the result they were looking for? Or is it a real study where they designed it to see what the actual result was? And trust me, they're done both ways. I can't even read this stuff at night because now I get so excited every time I read another one. Instead of helping me go to sleep because I burned up my extra mental energy, it's giving me more mental energy. This is what we have to look forward to with this product. I personally believe that this is the one product that I've been looking for at least 12 years. Something to help my clients modulate stress response in the human physiology, because the body pretty much knows how to take care of you, but we have to know how to help it take care of us, especially when we're chronically exposed to these outside stressors that affect our biochemistry in an adverse way when it becomes chronic.